So ladies and gentlemen, please give it up for our three special guests coming to you. Jan Gehl from Copenhagen. Coming to you, Matúš Valo from Bratislava. Coming to you, Igor Marko from now Bratislava, but before from London. And the only one who rode a bicycle to this event is Igor. Yeah. You did? I think you did, yes. Okay, so as you are taking back your seats, I would like to introduce our two guests, because Jan you have met before. So we'll start with Matúš Valo, and as you're coming back to your seats, you can partially listen to the introduction, because as you know, Matúš Valo is an architect, and he's a co-founder of Valo Sadovský Architects architectural studio. He studied in Rome, he worked in London, and he was awarded a Fulbright scholarship at Columbia University in New York. He is a founding member of civic associations We Are the City, the Alliance of Stará Tržnica, where we are actually, and he stood behind the Alliance of 500 Flats. He established the Urban Interventions Project, which generated more than 900 ideas to improve public urban spaces in 20 cities since 2008. He's the editor of the most comprehensive publication on urban solutions for Bratislava called Plan B, A Guide to a Better City. In 2018, Matúš Valo was elected the mayor of Slovak capital city Bratislava, and he has been in the office since. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Matúš Valo.
Sorry?
Thank you. Okay, I asked Jan this, and I'm going to ask you, which is your favorite part of Bratislava? Could be a building, could be a street, could be a monument, something that is really close to your heart.
Every street of Bratislava is my favorite, of course.
You're a politician now.
Not so much,
It
but
left a
little
mark
bit.
on you. Thank you, diplomatic answer. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce Igor Marko, who is a Slovak-British architect, urbanist, and urban designer. He is the co-founder and creative director of Marko and the Placemakers. Igor has been advising on and delivering successful projects beyond traditional realms of architecture for 25 years. His experimental approach to urbanism resulted in winning commissions for visionary projects such as Car-Free London, preparing the ground for transformation of London's pedestrian and cycling environment. Focusing on the transformational value of placemaking, Igor has been advising both private and public sector clients on the integration of public realm in new developments and major regeneration schemes. His work has been widely recognized in Europe, North America, and Asia. Please welcome Igor Marko. Good evening to you, gentlemen. Shall I ask you about your favorite place in Bratislava? Is there one? Your favorite corner, Igor? Your favorite street?
I always love the cities with rivers.
Yeah?
And I think that's something what is quite powerful, you know. Danube is a powerful river. And now I live actually opposite the river, and I think that's my favorite part, you know. I think it's very calming, and again, you know, the river makes city special. And Danube is a special river.
Indeed, it is.
So
indeed.
that's my favorite place, you know, that river and everything around it.
Thank you very much. So all three of you have different places that you like or you dislike in Bratislava, but we were at the beginning looking to find something that all three of you have in common, a common ground for all three of you, which is, logically, public spaces, something that is part of your career, that is your career for some of you. And that's what we're going to talk about, because you, all three of you, have lived and worked in various places around the world. So we'll start with talking about public spaces from that perspective, from perspective of various cities in the world, and then we're going to try to localize it and talk about specifics that Bratislavan cities in Slovakia or in this Central European region have to offer. So Igor, would you be so kind?
Well, yeah, where to start? I mean, can we just say the first part, you know, what was the thing? You know, I have to remember that, you know.
Comparisons between various countries.
Well, it's very difficult to compare, but again, you know, the first comparison is what I usually make is people. And, you know, that's what we agreed with Jan, you know, the people are the same everywhere. It is just what is different is the context, is historical context, physical context, and of course the content. You know, I think that something what differs those cities, and of course you have to understand how that kind of context and the presence and of course the history kind of affects people. So you have to understand where they are and what they actually need right now, and I think that needs a lot of understanding. So I think that before we do any work, you know, and that's again as a comparison, you know, to any projects we do, we have to go, you know, and be very local and to understand what are the real needs, you know. But again, people are the same everywhere.
Matúš, could you compare the public spaces of the cities that you visited or where you lived or worked?
I mean, public space is also as other, we can call it products of our life, are of course subject of the fact that many spaces are looking the same. And I need to say, I spent 4 years during the high school at Rome, where of course the weather is different and many people living in the street, and the public space has different meaning. And I can compare it with public space of New York, where public space wasn't the big topic few years ago. And of course, in European tradition, public space, which is we have our old city centrum with all pedestrian zones. And I need to say, I like the European way. I like how public space is based on the imprint of medieval cities, and this is what is my favorite kind of very calm with the old this kind of old stamp and with a lot of space for pedestrians.
Jan, the comparison between...
Does this work?
Yes, it works. It still works. Yes.
I was thinking about an experience I've had. I worked actually in real life. Of course, it's been my privilege to do a lot of research and then be invited to apply the research to real life. So I've worked with many, many places around the world. And there's one thing which I think is interesting. Every single place I've worked, they start by saying all this with people that would never work here because we are special. We are more devoted to motor cars in this part of the country, or on this continent, or New York, than anywhere else. You can never change that. You can go to Germany and then you say, we have an automobile, we have Porsche in this city, we can never change. Then you change the city, then they can change. Because they didn't realize that all these things could be common, but that we get into the habit that that can never be. Especially in New York, everybody said European ideas could never work in New York. And then they were introduced it. It appeared that there were people also in New York. And actually, Jan Gehl wrote about it 50, 60 years ago. But they never practiced it before they started with Bloomberg to close the streets and all this. So things can change. I also talked about this fantastic manipulation that we had spaces until 1933, and then we had buildings ever after. And now I'm saying that why don't we make spaces again? Then we can start, should we make spaces? Don't we have the internet and whatever? And that's another interesting discussion. But I've seen so many places change. And that's good medicine, because then we can say when they can do it in Iceland, when they can do it there and there and there, why? What's your argument for not being more kind to the people in this city or that city?
Just only to add one more thing, and that's an acknowledgement to your presentation, everything what you do, is that, you know, that's what amazing is that clarity, what you're saying. It's just very clear. It's very structured, very clear. You know, basically it's very universal. Everybody would understand what you're saying. And again, you know, I remember myself 10, 15 years ago when I saw your first presentation, it was immediately kind of like clear. You know, it was like, and the other thing what I appreciate is that persistency. Is that something that's what, again, maybe the politicians need, you know, it's something that you really need to stick on that vision. You know, like if you believe that it will work, of course it needs to be kind of based on a very clear understanding, you know, kind of, again, agreement, political agreement, you know, that will work, you know. So it's nothing like just kind of like an instant coffee, you know. It's something, it will take time. You know, it will take time. It's something what will, again, as we discuss, you know, it's painful, but, you know, you need to stick on it. And again, coming back to what you do, you know, it's just persistent, and of course, what I like about your presentation is humor. That really helps. You know, that really helps with a lot of kind of super complex issues. You know, it's like people say like the things are complex, we can't discuss it, it's too serious. No, you know, we can actually go kind of like overbridge it with a very simple kind of, again, basic behavior, communication. And again, I acknowledge you for that. Thank you.
Okay, let's move from New York to Bratislava. Let's move from North America to Central Europe. And it's true that Homo sapiens is Homo sapiens everywhere in the world. We all have the same needs. The approach is universal. But the challenges are local. So let's talk about the challenges when it comes to public spaces that are localized here in Central Europe, and let's talk about public spaces from the perspective of Central Europe. Maybe Matúš can start with the challenges. No, I'm kidding.
Of course, there are many challenges. I can say that. And the first is that we have exact, me as a mayor with my team before I became mayor, we have exact idea or ideal how we want to, where we want to push Bratislava, what we want to do. And we're still having the same one and still working, doing on it, but we understand that we cannot be the same city as in 1 or 2 years, where the same as another city where which is developing for 40 years, you know. We wanted to make these big jumps, and it's difficult. I saw it when we started to do bus lines. Today, we did all the bus lines in Bratislava we wanted to do. We have a program 4 years ago, now we did them all. But second one was a big backlash because people they want to drive cars and they don't, and it's difficult to explain them that 1 or 2 person in car means 80 people in bus. So 80 people are moving in a quicker way than 2 people in car. And the last bus line we did it without protesting. There wasn't protest. Everybody understand it better. So this is for me one very serious topic that we need to have a patience, and it's taking time. We cannot do the jumps. We are trying to do the big jumps, but it's impossible to do that without explaining and showing how it works, maybe making some pilots projects and so on. This is very important for me.
If I may ask Jan about this thing, because maybe you have that kind of experience, because Matúš already mentioned it, is that the key is the communication. Is that how you actually communicate the process. It's not just the product, because it's usually what you see like a kind of urban visions. You see something like a city, as you showed us, these kind of confusing cities. This is what you get. But actually you have to communicate not only the end of it, because there is a never end of it, but actually the process, how you want to get there, you know. And I think this is always a very difficult in the local context, you know, and how to actually do it. And obviously your practice is very experienced, you know, giving some advice how to do that, you know, because I think that's a key for any, you know, development in a city.
I completely agree that the communication part, that people can never ask for something they have no knowledge about. They've never seen. If you ask children about what do you want for Christmas, they can never mention a toy which has not been invented yet, but the moment they have the skateboard, they want that. So you have, also I'm very reluctant about just asking people what do you want, because they say we want trees, because they know trees are good. But if you show 6 cities and say, would you like this, or this, all is possible here, then at once you could have a much better discussion. And then when you say that can never happen here, that discussion ends when you show it happened there, it happened here, it happened here. They did it in various ways, but they changed from what they had to something else, and all the places they're happy about it or they would change it back again. I have no stories of turning back from this movement of humanizing cities. All of them who have started do more and more. So it's very important to show examples. Also, that's why I say that the most important things when I look at my life, that is writing the books and having the books being spread out all over. You can do endless many lectures. It's much better to put it down in a book, which is so easy that you can understand it with pictures and whatever. That has been very efficient communication. I think that is really important that you show the children what kind of playthings you can have here.
So it has an educational effect on it, you know. So
Absolutely. And I also see it as very important that I have a background as a teacher and have had to teach for 40 years and can use that experience.
maybe that's what we should teach the young architects, how to actually teach, you know.
Or learn how to communicate, because as we were talking with Igor, that you are an architect, but sometimes you call yourselves, or people call you the communicator.
No, I think
nickname.
that I'm a little bit of a journalist also,
Yeah.
who make complicated things over simple.
Well, I guess it's needed. Let's move to the next topic from public spaces. We're still staying locally in Central Europe and Slovakia. There is another phenomenon, which is the urban growth. When you can compare it to Western Europe, the growth of urban sprawl, or let's say suburbia. How should a city grow, or how should a city expand? Jan?
Yeah, I did much because I've become more and more obsessed with this fantastic change with the modernists, that we had spaces until suddenly it was objects. And if we look at Bratislava, you have definitely two completely different cities. You have the city of spaces here, and you have the city of objects here. And if you go from there to there, it's a completely different experience. And when we talk about public spaces, we all the time think about the older part, and when we think about public spaces in the object part of the city, it's difficult to define any place. We have so many words in our languages about events taking place, stattfinden in Germany, and in all the languages we have these, that we need a place. And where will you find the place in the placeless other part of Bratislava? That's really a very interesting and great challenge. What to do there? Would they not need it? I think they need it, but they go into the old part to find what they're looking for, I think. We have two cities.
We have one and many satellite cities, as we call them.
Yeah.
I mean, this is, if somebody asks me, like, what is the most evil thing in terms of new urbanism, or urbanism, basically the development, it is urban sprawl. It is like, that's what is really causing the biggest problems, particularly in Bratislava. And again, it's not Bratislava itself, but it's the whole region, you know. It's like, and I think that we tried so many times to find some incentives, how to actually bring, you know, development to the city. And again, you know, we going into the troubles with legislation, with a regulation plan, again, it costs money. So again, for developers, it's easier to build, you know, somewhere outside. And again, for many people, that's what they want. You know, they want a big house with a trampoline, and still, you know, it's much easier for them to, you know, it's more affordable in a way. So I think, but again, you know, from every perspective, you know, that if you look at from the ecological, economical, sociological, this is the worst thing what could happen. You know, it's really, it could, and again, we are repeating the same history. This is not like a new thing, you know. In every American city, they went through the same problem. So, but again, you know, it's a huge challenge, you know. I know that Matuš did dealing with it, and again, you know, it's a problem of a new regulatory plan, metropolitan plan. But again, you know, it's a difficult thing to conceive in a way.
Maybe I should mention The one American city which has done pretty well is Portland, Oregon. And if you look a little bit closer, around 1970, the city fathers, the city council, put a line around the city and say, this is how far we go with the city, and all new development has to happen inside this line. That means that instead of going to a piece of cheap land further out, they started to refine what they had. And they've been able to do a lot of good things because they put this growth line. So that is one way of approaching this problem.
But that goes to the, I would say, this more very feared word here, which is like densification, and I think that every time when you talk to people and they say like densification, they say, no, we don't want densification because it's a scary thing, it's like, and again, it goes back to a general problem, which is the growth, we had the same problem when we were writing the book Plan Bratislava before your election, that we are kind of like struggling with the word growth. Because it's scary and confusing, as you said in your presentation. Because for many people, it means a danger. It means danger that they will lose something. They are not going to gain something, and we are really trying to kind of reinterpret that, and say like, no, actually, growth is okay,
Also, we should realize that as architects, we have done a lot to make people scared of new construction. In many years, everything new has been that it was more foreign and more alienating, and you don't feel at home in this one. So better have some trees than having some modern architecture. That is one for us to think about. That all this forgetting about human scale and all that, and going for the objects which are shiny and different, that may be fun for us, but very few love it very much. And they're afraid of it, so they will rather have some trees, and I can understand them.
Matúš, what is your take on this? The boom of and bloom of suburbia, the urban sprawl, versus the ideal of a 15-minute city?
I mean, I like to listen to these two guys, so I prefer to listen, but I mean, all of us, I think, in this room, we know what is the big problem with urban sprawl and so on, and how it's affecting actually our city, and I think we are past this possibility to stop it in Bratislava. We need to start to live with it, and for the city is important to provide all the services. So people are not driving with cars from suburbs to Bratislava, but with public transport, or they're biking and so on. But what I really want to say is, Jan mentioned that we understanding public space is something, or I think I understand you mentioned it, that something which is in the old city, for example, and so. But what we are doing, and I'm trying to work on, to change the space, we are calling it space, which is now in 17 of many of Bratislava neighborhood, between the apartment building from 60s, 70s, 80s, to change this space to the public space. This is what, so what we are working now is to be able to say that we are creating, taking care and investing in public space, not only in the center of Bratislava, but also in all the neighborhood we have. And we start to work on it, and you understand that there's so many square meters, so many neglected meters, so no money invested in past to these spaces, and so many of them. So the question is how we're going to try to do the change that everybody, or many of our citizens, can really feel it, and this is what we're trying to do now, to move from this super polished public space, which we know we are able to do, and to try to think about it in very big scale.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea, and I appreciate that what you're doing is because you are kind of going out of the classic city center. So it's just like basically trying to parachute or kind of change and show that little transformation outside of the city, which is a natural habitat for change, you know, it was. So I think that that's a good strategy, and I really appreciate that good work. But it's, again, it's quite challenging because, you know, usually the environment is, again, you know, again, it's 60s, 70s, you know, and you really have to not only transform that space physically, but mentally. You know, and that's, I think, the biggest challenge, you know, is like to change the kind of the way how the people use it, you know.
What is good on this, sorry, and we are going somewhere else from your question, that it very helping that people loves this neighborhood. People loves Petržalka, which is actually 100,000 people living in a neighborhood, one of the Bratislava neighborhood here. And people are proud of it, and they're loving it. So this is something very new to me. I understand it only after I became mayor, and it's something, it's a good base for build another kind of relationship also to the physical space between this building.
Just only to add on to explain, you know, that huge Petržalka is the modernist city, you know.
It's the one on the other side of the river Danube.
So, but what is amazing, what Matúš was saying, is that, you know, that void that you were talking about, which was naturally in this the city's 60s, 70s, was infilled by the kind of terrible infrastructure. Here, actually, a lot of that space is green. Yep. And people somehow, because of that greenery and I would say in a way of feeling of freedom, you know, between the buildings, they started to like it. They just started to love that environment, you know. And I think the proximity to the very nice nature reserve and the Danube and everything, it becomes actually very popular, you know, place to live. And actually among all the places in Bratislava, a lot of citizens there would vote, you know, like on the high ranks, you know, that this is actually best place. And it's a modernist settlement.
What would be the time of building?
70s.
70s, okay. Then I know exactly how it looks.
Yeah, it looks just like in Korea, just like in Ukraine, just like
maybe
they look the same.
I should say that I can understand that when the trees are up and whatever, but what is happening in our country with these buildings from Plattenbau, or these buildings, modernistic buildings from those periods, they are, I mentioned it a couple of times, the issue of human scale, that one of the problems of the modernistic movement is that they forgot about human scale. It became too big, and you were sort of floating in free air, and you didn't feel any belonging. You didn't feel you have arrived to a place. So many times they are trying to introduce smaller scale in the big scale by making maybe two-story row houses in some kind of snakes down, so that there will be places of small scale between the big scale, and you will bring down, introduce human scale, which I think is a very obvious thing, because we really like scale, good scale, where we feel when we go on holiday, we will find that many times we go to places which are before 1933 and enjoy them.
There was actually, that was one of the questions through Slido, through the app, and there is another one for you, Jan. Streets in Bratislava are still full of cars. What would you recommend to make it more people-friendly?
What was the first word?
The streets in Bratislava are still filled with cars. What would you recommend to make it more people-friendly?
I did show from Copenhagen this a big program of changing all the streets to two-lane roads and introducing street trees and bicycle lanes, whatever. If you suggested it 50 years ago, everybody would say that's completely impossible. You can see it all over, and they found that they can handle the traffic smarter, and they didn't need all that space. So there is, in these streets, there are room for improvements, my opinion.
Do you agree, Matúš?
Yes.
Good. Let's move to another topic. The Slovak Chamber of Architects promotes, it's called hashtag Green for Architecture. With urban growth comes the question of responsible sustainability. So what should a city that will leave behind for future generations look like? What does the future of cities look like? Igor.
Yeah, I agree. It's still very confusing, and it's very difficult to predict. But again, there are certain things which we probably wouldn't avoid, you know, and then that's the climate change, you know, and that will happen. And I think that's when I go to the different conferences that we change the rhetorics from the sustainability into the surviving, you know, and it is true. We are really heading towards very tough times. And this is not something what we should do. We have to understand we have to do. And that's what we wrote PHSR, you know, the main document, the visionary document for the Bratislava. You know, I wrote the old one, you know, and everything was like what we should do in terms of climate emergency and everything. And I think it's now to change that rhetoric into what we must do. Because if we don't, we are in trouble. You know, there's no like some kind of technological gimmicks or something which will save us. You know, and I think I appreciate what you said. You know, it's like it goes back to the basics. It's not something like some kind of smart city or something will save us. No, you know, it's just again basic behavior, and we need to kind of scale it down. We need to kind of start to understand that we would have to, you know, again, overlap a lot of things in a city, you know. It's like kind of like live closer to each other and be more, I would say, efficient.
We talked before about sprawl, and the basic idea of sprawl is endless resources and cheap gasoline. Also another thing about sprawl is that no people get old. Because if you spread out, you need more mobility, you need more resources for technical services, you need more resources for driving and whatever. And we've seen increasingly that when these areas are a bit older, then there'll be one old person in each house, and it becomes a very big job for the society to give them food and to look after them and whatever. And one thing, when we talk about the future of city, I can tell about a major thing in Denmark now is co-housing for elderly. And that is, we call them plus 50, because we don't want them to be too old when they move in there. But I think there's 700,000 people signed up to go to a co-housing for elderly, where maybe 50 elderly live closer together, small units, and a lot of communal areas, and a lot of gardens where they can grow their things, and library and television room and computer room, whatever, so that you have, because one other thing about sprawl, that is loneliness and isolation, that you sit out there and there's nothing there, and nobody comes because nobody comes.
Some neighbors, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that is another new thing which we have to. And then I think it's interesting that during the COVID time there's come new words out, like the 15-minute city idea, which of course is just the old city. Venice is 15-minute city, and all the older cities were 15-minute cities. It's only that all the sprawl were half an hour or 2 hour cities. And so going for, actually most of what I talked about is fitting very nicely to the 15 minutes, that we make more diversity in each area and make sure that the elderly and the kids, whatever, they can live more closely, so that in this time of ours we can still have a community instead of sitting isolated out there.
Matúš, what kind of Bratislava would you like to leave for future generations?
There are two main things if you want to leave a real city to future generation. The first one, policy making, but this is also clear from other cities. They are we are still behind, but the green solutions or any kind of this kind of thing is not it must be an absolutely day-to-day normal part of what we are doing. So if we're doing any new building, we were asking how many resources is going to consume, and all this stuff must be like they're already in other cities and must be in all our policies. So when we are talking about anything, we always need to check the box if it's sustainable, for example. But this is the thing, it's clear and we need to work on it. And the second thing is communication again. We understand that we can understand it. We understand it, but also we study it in other cities, that's what we are doing. That you cannot change the habits of somebody who is 40, 45, 50, 60 years old. It's very difficult, but you can change it through their children. So this is why many campaigns for good things, not McDonald's, which was the first one who used children for buying products. They are using these very good communication skills to communicate with children, and after children are pushing their parents, for example, to do the separation, plastic, paper, and you can see the generation, how it's important for younger generation, this in what state our world is right now. And you can see it also, there's a small example that in Bratislava there is a lot of buzzing around the second-hand shops, because this younger generation don't want to use a new clothing. They're spending their money, which is just a portion of the money, on the second-hand clothing because they believe it's good for the planet. So this is very important. So every step in policy making need to be greener and good communication with much younger generation.
I think it's quite intriguing what you said in terms of that it has to be focused on the younger generation. I think that for other reasons it's very important, because everything what we decide now is not going to happen tomorrow. I think we know that it takes time. So everything whatever we dream now, it will take 20, 50 years. So it will be for our kids, not for us. So I think we have to, and that's our, I would say the main reason, to focus on the kids, to think that it's for them, everything what we do, So I think that's, and again, as a father, I realize that, this is very important and very logical step in life, And again, that responsibility is the driver, and not only for me, I think, for many people.
I think that it's very characteristic of nearly all the cities I work with that they have a vision, they have a goal. The most short-sighted was Bloomberg, who said that I want all this done very fast. That means while I'm still mayor, so I have a good platform for going on. But in Sydney, they have these 2030 vision. Now it's 2040 vision, so that we shall be here 2030, and to do that we have to be there. They have the same in Copenhagen, they had the same in Melbourne. They had visions which also binded the next group in City Hall, that we have this goal, and sometimes they had this funny effect that they elected the same mayor several times to make sure that they reached the goal. So something about having visions and having strategies rather than addressing things maybe in a 4-year perspective, which is, of course, it doesn't work. We have to look more and also realize where the real problems are. We've became so obsessed with COVID that we talked about nothing else, but still the major problem is the climate challenge, and that is much more important than making cities good for COVID or whatever. But we get distracted. We have to look and have a vision and look afar. Look at the children and the grandchildren.
So thank you very much for all these ideas that were brought out during this panel discussion. And now we come to the question, how do we implement them? to real life. So which tools, which means, or what kind of processes shall we utilize when projecting, when creating or maintaining a responsibly sustainable city? Take your time.
Oh, it's easy. No, I think that, I said it before, that the best way of implementing is showing. I would sometimes say that everything you need in city planning has been done somewhere. And it's only, the problem is to find where it was done and then communicate how it was done. Because there are so many good ideas around the world, so many problems have been solved, but few of them, all of them at the same place. So it's very much a thing about finding out where the examples are and showing the examples, and that would be to me the best method. That is to show it can be done, they have done it here, they've done it here, would you like it here in your neighborhood? And nearly always people will say, yeah, I think I can see perspectives here. My children will be more happy, whatever. So, education, information, and the ideas are there. We know everything. We just have to implement them and tell people about them.
This is actually the absolutely same idea as I'm promoting. We don't. There is a fantastic catalog of ideas for the city, and this is maybe the only advantage or good things why Bratislava was left so behind, that we can, all the other problems we are meeting now were already solved somewhere else. And this is also why mayors love to talk between themselves. And I spend a lot of times talking to other mayors from different countries in Europe, and there always this exchange of ideas, because it's just work. I don't have this ego to invent something new. I don't need to, and it should be a mistake. There are so many good examples around the world, and also because of Jan, so many good ideas circulating and are going through the world. So this is absolutely true, and I'm a big learner and student of other cities.
Cities, for example? Which examples do you like to bring to Bratislava, or which examples from which cities do
you can easily go to Brno to learn some stuff. Yeah, of course. You can go to Graz, Vienna. Vienna is one of the most developed cities in some way, and we have very good relationship with Vienna. If you want to know something, we just give them email and they open their database for us. For example, we're now working on the green facades on Obchodná Street here, and they already have a program, organization, which is promoting green facades in the city. They give you a grant, they give you everything, the know-how. So Prague, of course Prague, because they have Institute of Planning and Development, which we are interested in. And the first big love for the cities was born in New York. I was doing my Fulbright scholarship in New York in 2010. And of course I studied all you did with Janek Sadikan and Bloomberg, all these guys I knew after, and it's very interesting. What is important, and Mr. Gehl already mentioned it, the people are same everywhere, and the problems are maybe different scale, maybe little bit different angle, but are similar everywhere. For this reason, if you talk with any mayor from any city, you always come to the same problems and the same solution, of course. Or similar.
Igor, do you agree? It sounds very optimistic. I never looked at it from this perspective, Matusz, that it's actually an advantage that Bratislava is so behind.
I'm not glad about it.
An eternal optimist.
I'm not happy about it. They're so left behind. I hope we are moving in different speed, but it's true. This is the only one thing that we can. Any problem I have, somebody already had it 10, 5, 20 years before us.
You might be the only optimist in Slovak politics, I think.
I'm still architect, and architects must be optimistic, of course.
Yeah, I mean, there are no universal answers, of course, how to do that. But again, we need to understand that most of the Slovak or Central European or East European cities are left in kind of bit of disarray, you know, like after, you know, like the change, you know, that basically the public space and everything what we loved about the cities was kind of forgotten. And it is in a huge neglect, you know, and I think that neglect and of course something what was done here, also the new one, is not perfect and it's not good, kind of created this huge disbelief in future, you know, this belief that something could happen and something could change. And I think that maybe the only change or the possibility is to start with a smaller incremental steps and show the good examples and of course communicate that it really works, you know. So we really don't need sometimes a big statements, of course big things are always good, you know, to kind of as a vector for the future. But I think that we need good examples. I mean, real ones. People can touch it, feel it, you know. So, and again, it could be very small scale thing, but it needs to be done, you know, and it needs to be very clearly communicated and, you know, and promoted.
I think that Bratislava is very lucky to have an architect as a mayor. We have at various points discussed that it is interesting that so few architects have used their abilities and their education and their skills to go into politics to try to change the world. Most of the architects are going to the mayors and criticizing them for not letting them do what they like. But there's a number of interesting examples which you should listen for. One of the most interesting examples of renovation or improvement of a third world city is the city of Curitiba in Brazil. And if you scratch a little bit there, they elected in 1990 around, they elected an architect for mayor. And he used his architectural skills to make a vision for the future of this city, which was growing very fast. He introduced rapid bus lines. He was the first one who said that buses should run with 80 kilometers an hour. It should be metro on rubber wheels, which we can afford in developing countries. We should have bus corridors, and when the bus came, all the lights would be red for the cars, so bus could run through. And then he said, everybody who wants to live in Curitiba will have to live close to the bus corridors. And he had and he designed the bus stops himself to make sure that you could load the passengers much faster than normally, then you could run the bus faster. And it was such a success that there was big growth in the city, but that was absorbed. And what was happening was that many other third world cities and other cities in other parts, they started to copy his ideas. So he used his architectural and then he had to step down after 4 years. But then they selected the first architect in his office to continue, and 4 years later, Jamie Lerner could be back in mayor. I think he was back 2 or 3 times, and in between there were other architects who was keeping up the torch. And then he was a mayor, but then he got governor of the whole province of Paraná, and then he got president. But what did he get president of? That was the Union of Architects of the World, and he was the one who said now architects should take much more care of cities. And I think that's an interesting example of combining that you are an architect and you can also go into politics and do good. And few does, because most architects, they stay away from politics as best we can and criticize the politicians. But you have an excellent situation now. Go for it.
I think the problem with architects is we have a tendency to micromanage, you know. So we would love to control things and kind of design ourselves. But I think what we are learning more and more is to collaborate. I mean, that's And that's something what was very new for me after school. You know, that I learned that I need to work with people. I just can't do it on my own. And that's, again, you know, it's maybe close to, again, to be a leader of the city, you know, that you can't just design everything on your own, you know.
Thank you so much. So the final message is more architects in politics. Thank you so much, Jan, for being here. I hope you enjoyed this panel discussion. Is there anything that you gentlemen would like to add? Anything that wasn't addressed? Anything that you would like to mention tonight, here?
I mean, we are here, so we can talk to everyone if they are happy to talk. So
Happy birthday to Slovak Chamber of Architects, of course.
happy birthday, of course.
30
Happy
years.
birthday. What a great way to start the celebrations.
I brought with me a little a television documentary called Cities for People, which we made some years ago, which I think is very good because I was myself in the crew who did it. Because it tells about, it was done by Danish, Norwegian, Swedish, Finnish, and Icelandic television together. And it shows examples from the 5 countries. And it's very good for education. I left one copy with Corvin, and they promised to give you one so that you could show your employees this. And also I think would be great if you put it in the television. It was made for television. It's very universal. Where will you stand in a space? Where will you sit? Where will you walk? How does your senses work? Do you like wind and cold and all that stuff? Would you rather like sunshine, whatever? So it's very basic and about human scale, whatever. I think it could be. We talked about communication. This film is an example of an attempt to make basic communication available. It will be given to you shortly, and you can use it, not commercially, but you can use it educationally.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and thank you so much for coming, and thank you for celebrating and being here at one of the many events celebrating the 30 years since founding the Slovak Chamber of Architects. So I hope you had a great time tonight. I hope you will continue to have a good time tonight, because this party is not over, but this is the time for me to thank Mr. Jan Gehl here in Bratislava for you. Architect and communicator, Mr. Matúš Valo, architect and a mayor. And Mr. Igor Marko, architect. Gentlemen, thank you so much. And one more thing that I would like to mention is that this evening would not be possible without all the partners, and especially the general partner, the company Corwin. So thank you very much. And one more thing that I need to say, that this stage, as you see, we have musical instruments that are going to be used by František Báleš Ensemble, Hviezdoslav Sonety. They're the recipients of Radiohead Awards. So I hope you can enjoy their music. My name is Vera Westerova, and it was lovely to see all of you here tonight. Take care of yourselves. All the best. Good night.